Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Tristan here. Welcome back to another episode of the Tristan podcast, and I'm here with Tom. How's it going, Tom?
Going pretty well, going pretty well. As always, it's an honor to be back.
And it's an honor to have you. So, while I am in the process of trying to get others onto the podcast, just for the moment hasn't worked out just yet. So yeah, we'll have another episode of just Tom and I. Um, and yeah, I thought it would be a bit fun to have a light-hearted episode, just I guess talking about something that both Tom and I love very dearly, which is the amazing movie series of The Lord of the Rings. Um, yeah, so we're just gonna, I guess, break it down, just talk about what we love about the series, what they did well, and even, I guess, a bit of relation to the books, as I'm in the process of reading them, about halfway through the series, and Tom has read them. Um, yeah, I guess we'll just start off with the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
I mean, can I just start off by saying, when it comes to the movies, you can only watch the extended edition
Oh, yes, that's a
because
given.
all the extra, the special stuff is in the extended edition. When I was first introduced to the movies, I originally just watched the standard like theatrical cuts. But then when I look at later on YouTube to rewatch some of my favorite scenes and see all these extra scenes, and I was like, oh, well, where did these come from? I never saw them when I watched the trilogy. Then I looked a bit deeper and I realized there was a whole extended edition which I didn't even know existed. So then I had to rewatch the entire trilogy again, which I did during a couple days when I was really, really sick during high school. So it was actually really convenient. But so I just rewatched the entire thing again, and then I said to myself, "Yeah, the extended edition is just the way to go."
Yeah, like
Um,
the theatrical editions are still good, but
oh yeah, absolutely,
it's just
absolutely,
like, why would you not want more Lord of the Rings? Like,
yeah.
they
But
add so much more to them.
yeah, there's like so many like sort of like more like intimate conversations between characters that you find in the extended edition, which just flesh them out a bit more. There's more like lore drops or like references to things that have occurred in the extended history. So it's just way more enjoyable, and
Hmm.
it's much longer, which just makes it more fun.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll get into the Fellowship of the Ring, and we'll just, I guess, go through movie by movie. There might be
Yeah,
some crosses between the movies.
yeah,
And then I guess we can just give like an overall thoughts at the end. Um, yeah. So, what are your thoughts on the first movie?
I once heard someone say, I start with like the prologue, um, without I think
Okay.
it goes without saying, extremely memorable prologue. Uh, really well delivered, just encapsulates the entire history up to that point, or at least the history of the Second Age
Mm.
up to that point. Um, I once heard someone say that before then, it had stereotypically been the case in these sorts of like epic fantasy prologues, there'd be some like elderly like wizard narrating it. But then Lord of the Rings has, Galadriel narrate the prologue, and that was a bit of a switch from what people were expecting. But then I also heard someone said that helps to make it more memorable because it was breaking from that mold and doing something different. Then again, this person was an anonymous YouTube commenter, so I'm not sure how legitimate their opinion is. But it is still an interesting thought, nonetheless, to just see that even from the beginning, there's just like these little differences and just sort of extra steps that were being taken that just make the movie so special.
Yeah, I think with the prologue, what makes it work is just how much backstory they cover in a small amount of time while keeping you entertained, um, sort of getting you in the loop on like what this series is going to be like, while also just being entertaining and just seeing like, the full scale battle
Oh yeah,
between
yeah,
like the men and elves and the forces of Sauron at the start, while also
yeah.
seeing how powerful Sauron is, and then just how deceitful the ring can be, and just how much time
Mm,
passes. And I think it was, yeah, it's done really well, like from the music, the narration, and just what they choose to incorporate into it. Um, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, can we discuss Sauron's design? Because
Mm.
I mean, that prologue is where we get the most of is where we get like our main glimpses of Sauron in his that actually, funnily enough, at the in the end of the third movie, at the very final scene. By the way, we probably should have said this at the beginning, but spoilers for basically all of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they've been
anyway,
out for 20 years. Like, it's kind of your fault if you haven't watched them.
true, but just putting it out there just in
Anyway, there
case.
is spoilers.
Yeah, like at the very end where Aragorn is fighting that troll at the Battle of the Black, I think it's the Battle of the Black Gate.
Yeah.
Um, apparently one of the original plan had been for that to have been a manifestation of Sauron,
Right.
but they ended up cutting that because they wanted I believe they said it wouldn't have worked
Mm.
with the overall narratives. They just made it a troll instead.
Mm.
But yeah, I just mentioned that because to say if it because of that choice, it's mainly in the prologue that we get our main look at Sauron in his physical form. And I mean his armor design is just the design of
Mm.
his armor is really intimidating.
Yeah, just the spikes, the massive mace he has when he's fighting, like the sort of
Yeah.
the claw-like metal
Yeah.
gauntlets. Yeah, well, really, we don't really see him, I guess, in the physical manifestation at all in the series. Like, there's a few
Yeah.
other glimpses, but really, yeah, we probably see like 90% of the physical. It's because it's got to be in a flashback, I guess, or like even
Yeah.
the mural that's in Rivendell.
Yeah.
But like, yeah,
And obviously it makes sense because his physical
yeah,
form had been destroyed
yeah, and he sort of
before
lived
the events
on.
of the Lord of the Rings ever started.
Yeah, he lived on through the ring. But yeah, it's actually kind of interesting when you think about it. Like one of the main villains just not really having like that much physical like scene impact, yet you can still, I guess, feel
Well, I
the
mean,
presence and impact he has.
he gets diluted to like his main core essence, and that's the eye. The
Yeah,
eye is
yeah,
just such.
exactly.
The eye is just this very. It's a deceptively simple image, but it's this. It's this brilliant encapsulation of just everything that he is, and so when they want to instill you with that sort of like overwhelming presence, they don't need this massive guy in armor. You just need the eye.
Mm. Yeah, and I think how they use the eye, when Frodo puts on the ring, and just in general, I think they did that really well. And I mean, it creates an iconic quote of just "I see you," like, yeah,
Yeah,
like you also got that.
like
Yeah,
it's legitimately terrifying.
yeah, like. Anyway, wait, we won't get to the third. I was about to go back to the third movie, but we'll continue on the first one, I guess. So, sort of, I guess, following on from the prologue, give us the sort of the Shire. We'll talk about that sort of whole opening
Ugh.
scenes there. I think for me, when it comes to the Shire and the first movie, it's just there's just such a peaceful vibe and feeling that you get. Like
Mm,
your soul just feels at peace when listening to the music, the scenery,
yeah,
and I think that's really how they set up the show. It just starts off in this really like visually and like audioly, I don't think that's a proper word, appealing, I guess, compared to like, I don't know, when you get to the end and sort of the rest of the series, it's a lot more dark. And I think the way it starts in the Shire just really makes it work.
I mean, especially when you contrast that. So when you contrast that to what we've seen in the prologue, the color palette of the prologue is dark.
Yeah.
It's very grey. You've got like the battlefields um, of that climactic battle at the end of the Second Age, and then you have these like dark caves and these like valleys and hills and lakes. But and then you move on to the Shire, which is this like vibrant green color palette. Like green is the predominant color throughout the entire Shire. In fact, I don't think that there's such a vibrant dark green color palette that's used at any other point in the film. I mean,
Uh,
you could refer to to Rivendell, but that's
That's more of
but
a,
that's
like an
more of
orangey autumn, I'd say.
yeah, like yeah, like, it's very autumnal vibe. And
Mm.
I mean, you could mention Minas Morgul, but that's a very sickly, like
Yeah,
pale green. Like the
yeah.
Shire has that like vibrant, like rich, dark green color, and that just like really, it's very simple use of color, but it just sort of encapsulates the entire sort of soul of the Shire, which is just this peaceful, homely area that that I think the majority of people would absolutely love to just live there forever. I know I personally would.
I mean, as someone who has visited the set for the Shire in New Zealand, yeah, I would have. It'd be an amazing place to live. Like it feels just so like. I mean, I'm not someone who loves like outdoors and whatever, but the nature there and just the scenery was amazing. I guess there also is Lord of the Rings bias, but that's different.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, but I think even just the way the opening scenes of the Shire encapsulates how the hobbits are very shut off from the rest of the land. They don't really
mm,
know what's going on and they don't really care. Like they just mind their own business, live their day-to-day life. Yeah, and I think
yeah,
that they're able to show that well. But then you look at those, and then you look at Frodo, and I guess even Bilbo, and they're sort of very disconnected from the other hobbits.
yeah. There's I think that actually speaks to one of the well interesting things about the Shire, which is that despite because you've got such a strong level of connection and homogeneity between all the hobbits, anybody that displays like different ideas or different beliefs don't really have anywhere else they can turn to. And possibly that's partially why Bilbo sort of takes Frodo under his wing, so to speak, because he sees in Frodo, he sees a reflection of himself. Because Frodo isn't like his direct descendant, Frodo isn't his son,
Mm,
but he recognized that Frodo too has that sort of like adventurous spirit, or at least that potential for it that no one else in the Shire had.
mm. Yeah,
And so,
and I sorry,
yeah,
you go.
yeah. I mean, I was really just trying to like reinforce that point that the issue with living in the Shire, as beautiful as I think it would be, is that if you didn't fit in with everybody else, that would be really isolating, and
Mm,
that would kind of suck because you'd be feeling isolated and sort of like alone in this communal, like beautiful place.
mm. Yeah, what I was sort of going to add is I think that's like Frodo's sort of adventurous side is seen a lot more, or like shown a lot more in the books, and like speaks a bit more about his childhood, what happened to his parents, and like I guess why Bilbo took him under his wing, and I think that's something I enjoyed when I read through, just seeing that. Yeah, and then I guess you've got that Frodo who's reserved but adventurous now, but then we're also introduced to Sam who's super reserved, lacks the sort of the self-confidence. And then there's also the other two hobbits who have our focus on, which is Merry and Pippin, who seem to be on the other side of the like sort of spectrum, where they're a lot more adventurous, like
Yeah,
like on that sort of rebellious side.
yeah. They're essentially rebels.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're just sort of like those like crazy teenagers, like in essence.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and yeah, I think we're shown the four characters of the hobbits really well in just those opening short scenes we get of them. Just like it
mm,
allows us to understand who they are, and also like something the movie does well is they've got so much time, obviously, in the over the course of three movies, but they're able to just directly focus on the characters that will be on the journey, which in the books there's a lot more different characters that we didn't get to sort of hear a lot about in the movies. But I think that
Mm,
was a necessary change, just to have that focus on the important characters.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I will admit, one character that I was disappointed that the movies didn't include was Tom Bombadil. I think I've mentioned this
as
before.
everyone is. Yeah,
Yeah, like he's just so iconic in the books, just like the way he just like bursts onto the scene. He's just like
yeah,
so memorable. And for the films, not even to mention him in passing, I
yeah.
well, on the one hand, I can kind of forgive them for it because the rest of the movies are just so perfectly well done. I am still a bit sad because I mean it's Tom Bombadil, all right.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
I can see how he doesn't sort of fit the vibe of the movies that they were going for. Like he's a very upbeat, sing-song sort of
Mm,
character, but at the same time, he's also got a crazy amount of power. Like, I mean, he
yeah,
put on the ring and he didn't disappear. Like,
yeah, exactly.
no
Like
one else
that's
does that. Like, yeah, that just had me curious, if anything.
yeah. He's an enduring mystery within
Mm,
like the entire Lord of the Rings like cosmos. No one, I don't think even I don't know if Tolkien ever fully explained why Tom Bombadil is the way he is. I
mm,
mean, I don't know. I haven't read all of Tolkien's material. There's a lot of things that I'm missing out on that I do want to look into, but as of now, I don't have any answers, and I have not been able to find anything on the internet either.
mm. Yeah, and I guess just now continuing on. Um, yeah, I think it's um, yeah, really well established. I guess even Saruman's character, just that short interaction that he has with Gandalf at the start. I think
I
Chris.
mean, before Saruman,
Oh, okay.
let's
All right.
start with
Bring it
Gandalf.
back.
Let's start with Gandalf.
Gandalf. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. Should have started there first.
Yeah.
I think
Um.
the first
Yeah.
line he has just sets the tone for him. A wizard is never
Mm,
late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. Iconic
yeah.
line.
And I mean, it mirrors the books quite well because when Gandalf is introduced in the books, he's sort of portrayed as this like as a magician, like a traveling performer, kind of like kind of like a slightly more magical version of the Gleemen from the Wheel of Time series. At least, like the Gleemen in the series, at least at the beginning, are portrayed as like merchants, tinkerers. They bring news from other lands. They put on performances. They sing. I don't know if Gandalf necessarily sings as much, except that he drinks too much. But
Oh, he does sing a little bit. Like he
no,
sings a bit
that's
in the
true.
movies, and like there's
True.
obviously a lot more singing in the books. But yeah.
Yeah, I meant more in the sense that he's not like a traveling singer.
Ah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, not like
Yeah,
a performing
yeah,
singer. Yeah.
yeah. Like, but he comes to the Shire as like an entertainer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and and it's interesting given that. I mean, I know I said we'd focus on Gandalf, but I want to jump to Saruman just for a moment again here. I mean, given that they're both essentially angels, um, there's a real difference in their personalities there because Saruman is portrayed as this very like uptight and like serious, and as we soon find out, very power hungry individual. And I can't help but feel that he like they both started with a more or less like equal level of power, give or take give or take a little bit, but they more or less sort of started as angels. They both sort of got like reduced to like a mortal form upon entering Middle Earth, but Gandalf is okay with just making fireworks and just entertaining children. And you get the feeling that Saruman, despite all his power, would just never have agreed to sort of stoop so low, as it were.
Mm.
He'd never have agreed to sort of like interact with people in that way.
Yeah.
And then he ends up missing out, really,
Mm.
because you know he misses out on all the joy and festivity that's in hobbits, and
He's
he
a
just
very
he never
isolated
gets to.
character as well, though. Like even you see Isengard, and just
Mm.
how yeah isolated I guess from the world he is.
But
But
I
yeah.
mean, he isolates himself. Like
Mm.
originally, he went when he first arrived with Middle Earth. He went into the East with the Blue Wizards, but then he clearly left them at some point because he
Yeah.
came back, and he never actually mentioned what happened to them. I mean, it's never Tolkien never answers what happened to them either. But assuming that they survived,
Mm.
that would imply that he just ended up leaving them.
I mean, mate, the Blue Wizards have always just been something that I'm curious about. Just like,
Mm,
you don't really hear much about them. But anyway, I guess
yeah.
going back to Gandalf, I think something else you see with him early on is just like, yeah, sort of adding on, like, he feels comfortable in terms of the way he interacts with Frodo and Bilbo. Like, he's just like that character, you can trust, who's like makes you feel safe. But then at the same time, he does also have a crazy amount of power, which when Bilbo was, I guess, insulting him of being just like a thief, try and take the ring for himself, he shows that power. And so I think
Mm.
he's got that good balance to his character that, yes, he's a very friendly, safe character, but at the
I am
same
still
time,
listening. I'm just trying to. I've got one of the books there, but I'm trying to find a
oh yeah,
description of
all
some of
good, all
the
good.
wizards.
Yeah, but then at the same time, he's also got like just that crazy amount of power that, yeah, he can do some very insane things, which we see later on in the series. Um, yeah, I guess while you're continuing to search for Simon, we'll now touch on Saruman, which
Yes.
for me, just Christopher Lee plays the part so well. Like,
Mm,
perfect casting.
yes.
Like, he's just
Yeah.
got that power behind his voice. Look, he's just one of those actors who's made to be the villain. Like, like he just
He's got
plays
Dracula under his belt. He's got Count Dooku.
Count Dooku.
I mean, he's got plenty of other roles as
Willy
well.
Wonka's dad, the dentist who didn't let him eat
Mm,
chocolates, that's the biggest
yeah.
villain right there. um,
Uh,
yeah, but like even just the way he's introduced, where you just sort of hear his voice and then it sort of sinks in with the scene when like
yeah.
Gandalf approaches. Like, yeah, it's the perfect introduction.
I mean, I was just looking through the Silmarillion here, and it describes Saruman as actually having spent a lot of his time among men, and I quote, he was subtle in speech and skilled in all the devices of smithcraft. I mean, subtle in speech, like
Mm.
the his ability to sort of persuade people and and talk to people is really that's his strength.
Mm.
Like that's what he's good at. Even in the books, like when they're approaching Isengard in the third book, Gandalf makes it really clear that this guy he is very slippery and he can convince you to do almost anything.
Mm.
You've got to be really careful.
Yeah.
And the movie portrays that. Like it's like you said, you hear his voice, and that creates his presence even before the first shot of him.
Mm. And even just going further on into the first movie when the Fellowship was at the pass of the I'm gonna pronounce it wrong. Just the snow mountains. I'm not gonna try pronouncing it. Um, like just the voice portrayal that he had as he was sort of causing the avalanches is like just
Mm,
like it's such a powerful thing. And then even in the second movie with when he's talking to the army at
yeah.
Isengard, like, yeah, Christopher Lee's voice is just like it's
Mm,
perfect for a
yeah.
character like Saruman.
And it's like
Um,
you don't develop that skill overnight.
no.
Like we sit here and we're like, oh, it's so amazing, but obviously we don't see what would have been the countless hours and hours that he would have spent just throughout his life perfecting his skills, working on his abilities in order to put on these incredible performances that we see today.
Mm.
Like we don't have access to that. We can only imagine how intense that must have been for him and how long he would have had to spend just doing that throughout his life. But you know,
Although someone whose voice is just amazing, who I don't know if they would have had to put work in, I just think they're naturally gifted, was James Earl Jones, who recently passed away, unfortunately. But just
mm,
like his natural voice, he played Darth Vader, played Mufasa in The Lion King. Like, just if you go listen to just some of his interviews where he's just talking normally, like you can hear the bass levels and it's just
yeah,
crazy. But anyway, I'll bring it back before we get too far sidetracked. Um, all right, where were we at? I mean, I guess we can talk now about the Nazgul even. Just sort of, I guess,
Mm,
trying to keep in line with the events of the
yeah,
storyline.
yeah.
Yeah, well, you go first.
The Nazgul soundtrack is just so iconic.
Yeah.
And yes, I will say that about every single soundtrack,
Yeah.
but there's just something particularly just menacing about it, but also somewhat like exhilarating. But it's exhilarating to provide that sort of like edge of terror. Like it's the kind of music that you'd listen to while you're going on
Mm,
a run through like a forest in order to like it's like motivate you to run faster. Um, and it's just that sense of just like of just impending doom just coming closer and closer and closer. I mean, I always felt that the Nazgul were at their best in the first movie.
yeah, I
Um,
would agree with that.
as much as I loved, the sight of them like riding dragons and the whole thing with the Witch King just being, terrifying in
Mm,
the third movie. I always felt that they were at their most effective in the first film and at their most menacing and
mm,
arguably their most memorable. Just these like imposing, just like shades
mm.
of death just riding around, terrifying everyone they meet.
Yeah. Like, I think things they got right with it, which, like, I've later, when I read the books, or at least the first book, I'm only halfway through the second one. But I think they just, with the descriptions in the books to the movies, they got the appearance right, just with the cloaks. And even when you see their true form when Frodo puts on the ring, those forms are done amazing. But like even just their voices, their shrieks, like even their horses, like the red eyes the horses have, like just everything about them is done like so well. Like you feel like it's actually like you feel the creepiness while also like I guess ominous
Yeah,
sort of vibe they have. I think though
yeah,
that the books gave me just that bit of an edge of like from more edge from them than the movies did, especially with there was a scene where one of the Nazgul, which this wasn't in the movies, like when he hopped off his horse and he was sort of like crawling on the floor towards Frodo, I guess like tracking like his scent or like to the the scent of the ring almost.
mm,
In the end, what saved him was the wood elves passing through. But like
mm,
that sort of part of the book just had me right on edge.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
I mean, one scene from the movies that I think was my personal favorite scene at the Nazgul was when they're in the Inn of the Prancing Pony and they've entered the the false bedroom that like Aragorn had set up for them to go
Mm,
into. Like just the scene of just four of these things just standing there with their swords just like hovering over the
yeah.
beds. And like the first time I saw that, I didn't know what was gonna happen. So I was freaking out that entire time. And just again, it's just the image because like a black cloak and a sword that they're pretty. I mean, this might be taken the wrong way, but they're somewhat basic like design choices. It's not like overly elaborate. It's not like it's not too,
It
it's not like too
it's
crazy.
simple, like
Yeah,
but
but
effective.
that makes it work because it
Yeah.
just hones in just how effective it is. 'Cause it's just so ingrained in your mind.
Mm. I think yeah, like just what you were saying, just the first movie, like the Nazgul from I guess them chasing the hobbits from the Shire to sort of to Bree, then to sort of I guess Weathertop, where then you see their
Mm.
true form and Frodo gets stabbed, and then to Arwen, the whole
Oh
chase
yeah,
scene, and
that was
then
done really
like that. I think that's all we see of them really in the first movies, but like just all
well.
those scenes, you felt the presence of the Nazgul.
I mean, one thing I always felt about the Nazgul, and that's partially the reason why they weren't, in my opinion, as impressive in later movies, which is through no fault of the films or the books. It was a case of where they had to escalate the tension of each film. Like,
Mm,
I mean, I'll draw a parallel against the Wheel of Time, which is just another gigantic epic fantasy series. And spoilers for the Wheel of Time. Just putting that out there. Um, you know, you have these these you have these figures that serve as basically parallels to the Nazgul, the half men is what. Well, there's a lot of names for them throughout the books, just like there's a lot of names for the Nazgul, but half men is one of the names that they're given. And I mean, they're almost exactly the same. Like they've got like the black cloak, they've got the swords. But at the very beginning of the series, you know, there is just one. In the first book, there's just one of the half men, and that's enough to just terrify every character. Like when a single half man appears, just all hell just breaks loose. Like main characters get attacked, they almost die. It just brings death and destruction everywhere, and like no one can stand up to it. Then by the end of the series, when everybody's had their well, when everybody's like had their power scaled up, so to speak, you just have them mowing through like hundreds of thousands of them at once, and yeah, it's really cool. But then they sort of lose that edge that they had
Mm.
because you have to keep escalating and like building up that tension,
Mm.
which is
Well,
it's somewhat unavoidable. And again, I can't really fault either the Wheel of Time or the Lord of the Rings for doing that, but it still is unfortunately means that they because you have to keep escalating the tension and sort of like raising the stakes, you lose that same hit and that same intensity that you
mm.
got when the stakes were lower. It's like how in like a Marvel movie, the end of the world, nobody really cares. It had to be the end of the multiverse
Yeah,
because
true.
one world was no longer enough.
Yeah, fair. But I think Lord of the Rings still does it well with the Nazgul to keep them relevant. Like it goes from them to like riding the fell beasts or the dragons, um, and then obviously the Witch King. Them him actually having a physical different appearance to the Nazgul,
Mm,
to the other eight Nazgul. Sorry. I guess like the role he plays, like destroying Gandalf's staff. So I think they do well to still sort of keep them relevant. But
yeah.
obviously, yeah, in the early phases when it's just the four hobbits and then Aragon, who we'll get to later,
Mm,
it definitely feels a lot more pressure and sort of intensity there,
yeah.
which is, yeah, which I would agree with you why they're just so more like effective in the first movie, because then in the second and third movies you got like the like orcs, trolls,
Mm,
like just massive armies, so it's just like a bit more scaled down.
yeah.
You got giant elephants, like yeah, um,
The whole tragedy of the Nazgul is that they had so much promise. They were these powerful kings that
yeah,
had all this potential, and then they just get trapped in this sort of living death that isn't. It's like you can't even live properly,
they're just
but you're not even
mindless
allowed to
slaves.
die. You're just like you're just completely debased and just turned into this monstrosity,
Mm,
and you're just forced to exist like that, well, forever till if the ring gets destroyed.
mm,
Unless that happens, you're just stuck in this sort of like eternal half life, and that would just be that's just like the thought of that happening to anyone is just it's chilling.
mm,
It's an extremely disturbing thought,
for
especially
sure.
because there's this idea of death being like a release. There's that idea. People are like, oh, at least in death we can find rest. May he rest in peace. That sort of that idea is there
Mm,
in our collective like consciousness, but the Nazgul are an invalidation of that.
mm,
It's like
yeah,
there is no release. You just are enslaved forever.
their one single purpose is to find the ring and serve Sauron ultimately, and
Yeah.
yeah, they literally don't rest or anything.
Mm,
They're just those mindless slaves.
yeah.
For time's sake, we'll keep going. We're probably gonna have to do this. Either we can film a majority of this in this one sitting, but we're probably gonna have to break down the episodes because they're already over 30 minutes and we're like not
Oh
even
my goodness.
halfway through the first movie. Anyway, I was gonna say we could talk about I guess Aragon, but maybe we could even just talk about like Rivendell and like just the whole council. Up to you
Mm.
if you want to have a quick touch on Aragon's character.
We'll do the council,
I,
then we'll go back to Aragon.
I feel like we can come back to him a bit later at the end of discussing number one, just because yeah, you get a bit more of
Yeah,
him later. Yeah, so I
yeah.
guess we'll just go to Rivendell, and the council and
I
the
mean, one thing
forming
I
the
always found
fellowship.
interesting about Rivendell is that, and the elves in general, that Peter Jackson's trilogy, is that when you read the books, the elves are like really jovial.
Hmm.
Like they're really like their songs are much more like almost jumpy and and rhyme. They rhyme a lot more. They're very like sort of like jump. They're more like jovial type of songs.
Hmm.
But then you watch the movies and they're much more like stirred. There's just this like serene, calm, like peaceful. Um, they're like very like stirred and powerful. They're like these are like immortal beings that have seen the passing of ages. Which especially like in the book of the Hobbit, when the dwarves are entering Rivendell, the elves are just like basically having the time of their lives laughing at them.
Hmm.
But then Peter Jackson has this complete contrast in their personalities, but which I think works. I think either version works. I mean, I'm more used to the image of like the stoic elf, so to speak, because that's sort of been replicated in like a lot of other epic fantasy media.
Hmm.
But it is interesting that they're more than just like the stoic faces that we see in the films.
Hmm.
There's a lot more to them that the films, well, aren't really able to cover just for the sake of time and like
Yeah.
maintaining a focused story. But there's like these beings had a whole history like before any of the other races of Middle Earth, like before men, before hobbits, like the
Hmm.
elves. The elves were the firstborn; they came first. Um, and there's just, and I think the films. I mean, I know I just said that the films don't really go into their history, but I think the films do create that sense of timelessness that they've just like they've just existed through like all through the
Hmm.
passings of the sun. They've like lived through all the ages, and I think the film does convey that very well, especially in Elrond.
Yeah, where especially when he talks about it being there 3,000 years ago,
Yeah.
when Isildur failed to destroy the ring. I think, yeah, I guess that's a good link back to the prologue. How they use
Mm,
Elrond there is sort of showing, how old and how long the elves live for,
yeah.
um, while also giving more context to what happened in the prologue and with the ring and sort of how it needs to be destroyed. Um, and yeah, I guess we'll move into the council a bit more now. And
Actually, before we do,
oh yeah,
here's one thing I just wanted to ask you.
yep.
Do you think that Elrond, like, so they're standing there at the summit of Mount Doom, Elrond is begging Isildur to destroy the ring, and Isildur refuses. Do you think Elrond, in that moment, would have been justified in just like trying to kill Isildur, destroy the ring himself, or do you think that would have just been playing into the ring's hands?
It's a tough question. The thing is, I've thought about this a lot, and I think he would be justified, but I don't think he could have. It's like a weird sort of balance that like the ring has its will, but at the same time, it's like I don't know, would the ring be having an effect on Elrond, even though he's not in possession of it? Um, but also then would Elrond be like, would it be worth Elrond risking sort of his, I guess, moral compass in doing so? But then it's like, would you sacrifice just one man's life for the greater good?
Mm.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Um,
I
yeah,
mean, one,
I can't give a straight answer though.
yeah. I mean, one theory I've always had as to why Elrond didn't just kill Isildur is because Elrond and because Isildur is a Numenorean. He's descended from the race of Numenor, or like a
Fair,
race of
yeah.
men. the first Numenorian was actually um
Pretty strong.
no, what I was gonna say was the first Numenorian was actually Elrond's brother.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
I
Alros.
can't I can't recall his name at the
Alros.
moment. It's yes. I don't know why I forgot the name, but yeah. So the first Numenorian, so he would have basically been speaking to his own brother's children.
Mm.
Maybe not his maybe not like his direct children, but these would have still been
Mm.
like the race of his brother, of his own family, and and that adds a layer of complexity. Like, would he have been able to kill his own brother's son?
Mm. Yeah, I guess that also adds a bit of like dimensions to that complexity
Mm.
sort of dilemma there. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that actually as well though. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I'd forgotten as well, but while you were discussing it, I was just like, wait a minute, how did I not mention this?
Hmm. Anyway, council.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think the thing I love about the council is you get to see the different species and like races of
Mm.
like characters in Middle Earth coming together for this one common purpose. Um, and yeah, it's a perfect way to introduce the other main characters.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a lot to unpack, but I think yeah, one thing you see is the ring's impact on Boromir's mind straight away. Then again, he also has the pressures of his father, which you'll see
Mm.
later in the series. And then
Yeah.
you got that relationship that Legolas and Aragorn have with each other, the respect.
Mm.
Then you see the sternness and sort of like the firm, hard character of like Gimli and the dwarves.
Mm.
And then again, you see more of Gandalf's character, and also I guess Elrond's. Like I guess yeah, a bit more of a lack of faith. Obviously having seen men fail once
Yeah.
before, you see, yeah. So it's a very interesting scene, and then Frodo's just there, off the side. Yeah.
I mean,
Thoughts?
without Frodo and the hobbits, that council may never have reached a conclusion
Mm.
because there would have just been like constant infighting. Like you see it in the film, they just like devolve into this complete like this complete mess. Everybody's arguing with each other. Elrond had basically just given up. Um, they needed Frodo to step in. They
Mm.
needed like a neutral party, so to speak. They needed someone to be the bigger man and to take the risk.
Mm.
Um, and none of them, despite all their power and all their strength and all the glory of their lineage, blah blah blah, none of them were capable of doing that.
Mm.
It was the simple, the dare I say it, almost basic Hobbit that
Mm.
does what none of them could.
Yeah. And
Even just in that one moment, and that sort of like
mm.
a pre-configuration of his ultimate act of heroism, which is to carry the ring all the way to Mount Doom. But that's sort of like pre-configured in just that one moment of just stepping up.
Mm. And like even when he accepts the fate, like he says like he doesn't know like the way or like the trolls, and it's like you've got all these other powerful characters. You got a wizard, you got like elves, you got these strong men, strong dwarves, and yet here's this small guy who is very fragile, not a great fighter. Like you sort of worried for him in a sense.
Yeah,
Like you wonder how he's gonna complete this journey. But yeah, and then I guess you start to see the foundations of the Fellowship form when you got, I guess, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli sort of pledging themselves to Frodo, as well as Gandalf and Boromir. And then, of course, the hobbits come and running out, which
yeah,
is always a fun delight, especially with Pippin's
yeah.
cluelessness of not knowing where they're going. um,
But I mean, arguably, that's the most powerful show of loyalty in the council.
mm,
When the hobbits, like when Sam, Merry, and Pippin step up to join Frodo. That's what has the most weight. It's not like Aragorn or Boromir or anyone else saying, "Oh yes, we're with you." It's when they just stand by their friend.
Mm.
Like that's what
Yeah.
has the most force. Like that's what's so good about Lord of the Rings as a whole. Like the most powerful moments aren't from like the amazing amazing characters doing all their cool stuff. The most gut wrenching moments come from just the hobbits.
Mm.
They come from just. I mean, Tolkien wrote the hobbits to represent the average person. He didn't even portray the average human as a human. He portrayed them as a hobbit,
Mm.
as a shorter, diminutive, weaker version of a human. And yet, it's those people that make the greatest difference in the end.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, and just I think yeah, like I was touching on with even like Merry and Pippin, and like I guess like Gimli in the sense like they just add that bit of humor to this dark sided, like very dark, like serious movie. It's just a good balance of
Yeah,
humor. Um, yeah, and that's just yeah, love those characters and how they're used in the movies. And I think something that wasn't really mentioned in the movies, which was mentioned in the book, is there being nine in the Fellowship to counteract the nine Nazgul. I think that was
mm,
a very interesting thing from the books. Um, anyway, we'll keep going because we are dragging out so much, which was expected to be honest.
yeah,
I guess we'll just yeah we'll skip towards I guess even just the mines of Moria. I mean there's sort of I guess the
oh,
mountain pass, but we'll just go straight to the mines
yeah.
and break
I
down
mean, of
that.
course, the funniest thing is like the movies skip so much of that journey.
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
books go into almost like painstaking detail of like everything that they did on that path.
Mm,
But then, I mean, and I can understand why. Like the movies, despite how long they are, they can't go for
yeah.
6 hours each.
As much as we'd love that, I
Yeah, yeah.
don't think
But
we'd be complaining.
yeah, no, no, I certainly wouldn't.
No.
But yeah, I mean, the Mayans.
I guess we'll
That
just
is,
start with the Watcher that's in the lake, which is like I guess the
yeah,
octopus, whatever you want to call it. Like
mm,
just starting from that, having the door riddle, like the dwarf door being hidden, and that whole fight scene, you're already starting to see some crazy dangers
yeah.
from this
And
pass, and
again,
they haven't even
it's
entered the
this,
mines.
yeah, but it's that slow build up.
Yeah,
Like it starts very sort of subtle, like you don't really notice it. Then you start to get hints that there's something there. Then you have that like shot where like that like sort of like that sort of shot like it rises out of the lake. You can see through its eyes, and you're like, oh no, something's about to go down. And then it
yeah,
comes Frodo, and you're like, oh boy.
yeah. And then they find out like the mines is basically just like a tomb. Like the dwarves have all been wiped out there, but then they're forced to
Actually,
go through.
actually, let's go back just one step before that. While they're still trying to find their way into Moria proper,
Mm.
and they're like trapped at the crossroads. Um, we have that conversation with Gandalf and Frodo about.
Oh no. So no, this was still when they're just first entering Moria and they see all the dead dwarves.
Oh yes, yes, you're
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yes,
and then they get
yes,
trapped
good
and
point.
sort of forced to go through when they were going to sail us. Yeah,
True,
no,
true.
I'm
Good
not
point.
skipping that conversation.
Okay, good.
Anyway, well, we'll go to there now. The crossroads, I guess. We get a glimpse of
Yeah.
Gollum, and then we have that
Mm,
conversation with Gandalf and Frodo.
yeah.
Yeah, you go into it. You take it away.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
Mm,
Just uh, there are some things that just stay in your head. Just they're just like burned into your mind. What else? It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Like
mm,
Gandalf has this. I mean, if Saruman is the one who can speak, Gandalf is the one who actually watches and listens.
mm,
Like he observes what's happening around him, and he essentially sees through people.
Mm.
Something which Saruman, for all his power, doesn't do. Saruman doesn't see how that his own actions are leading to his own destruction, but Gandalf notices that, and Gandalf always notices what people around him are going through, and it makes sense from a lore perspective, because in the Silmarillion it explains that he actually lived within the with he actually, I'll see if I can find the exact passage about him, because I think
Mm.
it really develops his it really explains a lot about his character. I'll see if I can find it.
While you're doing that, I'll even just continue on. Like even like in that speech when Gandalf's talking about how Bilbo's like pity for Gollum stopped him from killing him, and later on we see how big of a role Gollum plays in the movies. Um, and yeah, even with Gandalf himself, like there's so many just amazing lines in the books that he has, which I think they do very well at depicting that in the movies, but there's still just so much like missed out that I've already seen in the books of like his speech and how like I guess elegant in a way of saying elegant, inspiring, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Are there any other specific scenes from the books that you thought were really memorable
Oh,
that the
they're
movies
they're all
didn't?
in the second movie. Oh, from the
That's
second book
true.
where he's Gandalf has come back as Gandalf the White. So I won't get into those just yet. Um, yeah, but then even we start to see Gollum just tracking the company, or the Fellowship, sorry. And yeah, like we just get this nice downtime scene as Gandalf's trying to remember which way it is. Um,
Mm. It's like a sort of break in the action.
yeah, yeah. Um, while also building on the characters and their personalities. Um, I mean, while you still find that, I'll just continue on. I
Yeah.
guess we go then, they find the path, and then they come across Balin's tomb and the sort of the book that was being written by the dwarves of what was going on. And just that whole scene as Gandalf's reading the lines from the book, man, the tension is just crazy. And then you have Pippin, who's a clown, who just drops the skeleton down. You hear all the noises, and then you start to hear the drums, and just, yeah, that whole build up is just amazing.
I mean, I didn't find the specific verse that I was looking verses. I didn't find this just shows how we treat Lord of the Rings. Okay, I didn't find the specific part I was looking for, but I did actually find something else that I thought was really interesting about Gandalf in particular. This is in the book Unfinished Tales, which is like a list of like letters and essays and like stories by Tolkien, like early drafts of his work and like commentaries by his son. And it says that Gandalf opposed the fire that devours and wastes with the fire that kindles.
Mm,
And Gandalf himself was merry, he was kindly to the young and simple, and yet quick at times to sharp speech and the rebuking of folly. But he was not proud and sought neither power nor praise.
mm,
And I mean, going back to the conversation with Frodo, like Gandalf is very insightful, and he has a considerable amount of power. Um, he has a level of authority, and yet he's able to not let it go to his head, so to speak.
mm,
He's able to maintain his kindly nature. He's able to sort of he views situations with compassion. I think is what I'm trying to say. Like when he looks at at the whole thing with when Frodo like says, why didn't Bilbo kill Gollum? He recognizes that Bilbo was acting out of compassion. And he
mm,
recognizes that that Bilbo made the choice that he believed was right at the time.
mm.
Um, Yeah, it's just an idea. Many who live deserve death, and many that die deserve life. I probably got it mixed up, the exact.
We
But
get the idea. We get the idea.
it's been too long since I've watched the movies or read the books. My memory is very hazy, as
Mm,
horrible as it is to admit. But yeah, let's go back to that idea. Like there are many who live deserve death, and many who die deserve life, and we don't have the power to give it to them. We can't. We can't apportion that power out as we see fit, and therefore we should never be too quick to sort of deal out that final judgment. And
mm,
it's I mean, the whole books and movies are filled with like these intense like scenes throughout their entire narrative. But just I think that is a it's it's uniquely powerful.
mm,
I think it's a unique message that Gandalf is trying to convey to Frodo, and it's like he doesn't just want Frodo to be, another Aragorn or another Boromir, because he knows that's not what the world needs. It's like there are plenty of like
mm,
incredible warriors and incredible leaders, but you can't just have that.
mm,
Like you need more,
mm.
and he's able to sort of recognize that and try to encourage that and develop that. And
Yeah.
even just the idea that that a lot of that people don't get in this life necessarily. People don't get what they deserve. Bad people thrive in, well, to use simplistic language, you know, bad people thrive and good people don't. Um, and I mean, he doesn't sugarcoat that. He makes it very clear. He doesn't try to be. He doesn't say, "Oh, it's okay. Good guys always win." He's like, "No, sometimes they don't in this life, and that really sucks. But you know, how are you going to deal with that?"
Mm.
And he doesn't necessarily. It's just interesting. He doesn't actually specifically tell Frodo what to do with his time. He just says, "You have to
Yeah.
decide."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, he leaves it up to Frodo, I guess. But I think it's just like in these sort of conversations and through the use of, I guess, Gandalf, just throughout the movies and the books, you really see, I guess, the theological side of Tolkien's writing. Obviously,
Mm,
I think he was a Catholic,
yeah.
but
I
like,
don't know for sure. I don't know for sure of his
yeah, but
timing.
it's not like obviously
Like,
directly. He says that Lord of the Rings weren't directly linked to any sort of parts of the Bible or anything, but like you can see those themes and like theological side of those themes, I guess, conveyed through the movies, and even
mm,
just the he was writing obviously was based on the world he saw around him as well that was going on, which at that time
yeah.
there was the whole like industrialization of everything sort of
Mm,
going on, which he sort of paints the orcs and all them as the
yeah.
like the machines and all that coming into
I
the
mean, he
world.
paints it in a very negative light,
Yeah.
which is interesting given that at that time industrialization was seen as this
Mm,
incredible thing. It was like this was the way forward.
mm.
This was this was this was the it was the way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
he was sort of
he was on the other side sort of thing.
yeah. It's interesting that out of all the works from that period, that is one of the works that survives. You know,
Mm,
a piece of literature that was actually very critical of the time that it was born into.
mm. Anyway, continuing. Um, yeah, I love the sort of fight between the orcs and the cave troll we get to see into that room. You get to see the Fellowship in action more. You
Yeah,
get to see the hobbits trying to fight.
yeah.
The
Character
skills of
development. It's such brilliant
yeah,
character development.
yeah,
Like when they fought when they fought against the Nazgul, they
they
were
were hopeless.
terrified.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but then
and
you see them
here,
training against Boromir,
yeah, and it's like here against the goblins, they
or
they
orcs first.
yeah, orcs, yeah. They
No,
just
mix,
run
yeah,
in head. They just run
yeah.
in head on. Like they 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 don't shy away.
Mm.
They just go straight into it.
And
Like
then
that's
yeah, you get to see a bit more how like powerful of I guess men Aragon and Boromir are, as well as
mm,
Gimli. and Gandalf, and then I guess you get to see the skills of Legolas as a bowman, and just even on his feet,
Yeah.
and walking across a
Look,
chain.
Legolas in the movies was just he was a little bit overpowered. Not that I
Yeah,
cared, of course.
but I
Again,
think it
I am
fits.
biased, but
It fits with
true.
the books. Like, even I think I
That is
loved
true.
in the first movie. I loved when they were walking through the snowy mountains. How everyone's like waist deep in the snow, but then Legolas is walking on top of the snow because he's like
Yeah.
that light-footed. Like, that's how he's
Mm,
described in the books, and I think that's an amazing detail that they added in the movie. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, and then you
It's
get
just
that.
built different.
Yeah, literally,
Literally too.
literally, and then you get that sort of like Frodo in danger, I guess, again when he gets sort of impaled by
Mm,
the cave troll, just to realize that he's got the mithril shirt and it's strong.
yeah.
Like, the thing is though, like, even though he didn't get stabbed, like, that still would have hurt, and I'm pretty like it still left a bruise, which it's
Yeah.
described a bit more in the books, which is
Yeah.
obviously
Like
why.
this was the force of a cave troll
Yeah,
jamming a stick into you. Like
like, even though you
that
don't
would
get
still hurt.
stabbed, it still hurts. Like,
There's a lot of blood trauma behind that.
yeah, which is why, like, he does go down, obviously.
Yeah.
Which I was a bit confused of that as a kid, but then realized it a
Look,
bit
it,
more.
it was it might have been overplayed a little bit just for dramatic effect,
Yeah,
but
of course,
still.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course there's the whole scene of the Fellowship running through Moria. You've got
Mm.
the goblins that are running down. They're surrounded by hundreds of goblins.
Just the image of them crawling out of the ceiling as
Oh,
well.
it's
Just
amazing.
that was terrifying.
Yeah, you see how much more, like, I guess, scrawny and like sort of
Mm.
bug-like, I guess, they are compared to the
Yeah.
orcs. But
Yeah.
then enter the Balrog. You hear his shriek and sort of the light, his shriek, sorry, and the light entering, and all the goblins just run away, which just
Yeah.
gives the context, like, already. You haven't met this character, but he's
Yeah.
powerful. like, like, yeah, and then
Evil
you got
runs.
all the
Evil flees
amazing
in the face of a
harmonizing.
great. Evil flees in the face of a greater evil.
Oh yeah, literally. There's always a bigger fish.
Yeah.
But like, and then as they're running through Moria, just like the harmonizing and like soundtrack, the giant stairs,
Yeah.
everything's just amazing.
I will be honest. The sequence where the Balrog enters all the way up to into the battle on the bridge. That is, it's so hard for me to like say, oh, this is my favorite part of the movie. This is my favorite part because they're also
Yeah.
amazing. But that's got
It,
to be one of my one of my highlights, if not my favorite part of
mm,
possibly even the entire trilogy. Just
mm.
that sequence. Like, that's just my personal take, but
Mm.
I've always just
I
loved that entire
I do
sequence.
have a soft spot for just like the Moria sort of arc as a whole. It is one of my
Sure.
probably my favorite, at least in the first movie.
The
Um,
architecture alone is
oh
just so
yeah,
unique.
yeah, for sure. But like, just that storyline through Moria is just, it does have a soft spot in
Mm.
my heart. But yeah, and
Especially
then
when you know the backstory from The
yeah,
Hobbit, it just makes it so much worse.
exactly. Like Balin, yeah, he's a loved character.
Like I had no idea when I first saw the movie. I was like, "Oh, dead dwarf. That's really sad." Then I read
yeah,
The Hobbit. And I was like, "Oh, it's that dwarf.
yeah,
This is really sad."
yeah. It's a lot more sad when you realize that. But yeah, and then they get across the stairs. You get to see some more badass shooting from Legolas from long
Yeah.
distance. They get across and then enter the Balrog. Now,
Mm.
for 2000s movie that would have been made and produced in like late 90s, the CGI and just everything, how they did the Balrog was amazing. Like, for its
Mm.
time, like, it still holds up very much so. Um, yeah, like the flame effects, just the sound, like it
Mm.
was just done amazing. But
Okay, here's a debate we go into.
okay,
Does the Balrog actually have wings?
yes,
Mm.
I don't know. Well, I mean, his wings are shown.
But are they like functional wings, or are they just like remnant wings, so to speak?
I don't know. Like, are they needed? Do you mean like can he
I mean more in the sense of like
like fly and sort of launch himself
I
with
was
like his
gonna say in the sense
flame?
of
Or?
are they like physically tangible wings, or are they more just projections of fire?
Ooh. No, I think they're definitely tangible. Like, because you see them like they're just sort of black, I guess. But
Mm.
it's more so if the wings allow him to fly, or it's more so those Andor reliance on like just like his flame of being able to like use his flame to launch. It's like, yeah, I'm not sure. It's an interesting one though.
I've seen some depictions of the Balrog where Balrogs can fly, but I mean, actually, going back to the Balrog, what I think I'm going back, we're still discussing it, but I mean, we mentioned this before, but there's so much of the history that they don't cover. Like, you've got Sauron in a reduced form, so to speak. He's lost his physical presence. Even the Balrog, when you look at like the first age of Middle Earth, there was not just one of things. There was like a ridiculous number of them. That wasn't even their
Hmm.
strongest. That wasn't even their strongest number. That wasn't their strongest champion, so to speak. That was probably just one of. That was quite possibly, given that it had survived so long, it was possibly one of the weaker Balrogs that had fled.
Mm. Yeah, honestly.
And yet that one Balrog has just such a presence.
Mm.
One other thing about it that I've always loved is that its roar is just so brilliantly reminiscent of the sound of flames.
Mm.
It sounds like a furnace.
Yeah.
It could have just been a budget Jurassic Park T-Rex roar, but they didn't do that. It could have just been a generic monster roar. They gave it the sound of a
You
furnace.
can hear the flames in it. Like
That
it's
that
done well.
detail alone, I can't describe just how much that elevates the entire just
Mm.
its entire spectacle just from that one detail. The
Mm.
fact that it sounds like a furnace.
And I think just like the build up, and I guess you sort of feel the sheer presence of the Balrog then leads to seeing how powerful Gandalf is to be able to withstand and
Mm.
fight and face him on the bridge. And then of course you get the iconic line of "You shall not pass." And then
I was always. Wait, have
yeah,
you read? You finished the Fellowship of the Ring, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I was always heartbroken that that line
yeah.
isn't said word for word in the book.
Yeah, I mean,
It's one of the.
it's
Well,
just
well,
it works in the
I'm normally
movie.
the kind of person that likes to say that the books are better than the movie, but in this specific instance,
Mm.
the movie did that scene much better.
I
Just that
think.
that
Oh, sorry,
that
go on. Go.
line, that line is just well, one is it's very memeable.
Mm.
Um, but two, it's just such a brilliant scene. It just
Mm.
it's just so powerful. I, I, I'll say those lines. I'm going to say the phrase "that line is so powerful" about a trillion times throughout
Yeah,
this recording because
for sure. But I think like yeah, that one thing. Another thing that I think the movies do better than the books are the battle scenes. At least so far from what I've read, the battle scenes just feel a lot more short and not as like epic as the movies made them out, which is why I think the movies were successful. Was like the amazing cinematography and all that through the battle scenes.
mm. Well, action scenes as
Yeah.
a whole are a lot easier to depict in film. At least based on when I've like compared like books and film. But of course, films have that like visual element to them. You don't have to like imagine like the events in your head. It just gives it to you.
Mm.
And they can, of course, do all sorts of crazy stuff with with visual effects and choreography and
Mm. Yeah.
yeah.
And then I guess going on from that, Gandalf falls. You think he's
Mm,
gone. There's this amazing, heartfelt, like sort of
mm.
brutal scene where you see
Yeah,
the Fellowship grieving, and it's not like it's
yeah,
just a quick like 2 minute scene. Like they don't even give you that much time.
yeah.
Um,
Like
yeah,
even I think I mentioned this to you before. Even when you've watched it like a bunch of times, like me, and you know that
it
that
still hurts.
that he's still alive,
It
that
hurts.
scene just hurts.
Yeah,
Even when you
especially
know how it's going to end, you still feel it.
seeing how broken Pippin is, knowing that he sort of started the chain of events. Like, yeah, it's brutal. Anyway, continue on. We get to Lothlorien. We get to see, I guess,
Mm,
Galadriel. Uh, yeah, I mean, I guess we can touch on her a little bit if you want. Just
yeah,
we'll try to keep it short for time's sake, but
she's an interesting character. Like, you read about her in the Silmarillion, and she's very different. Like, she's very brash.
hmm,
She's very like, well, not forceful, but she's like very like, she's very willful. She goes out like into Middle Earth, and then she stays there for so long that when you reach the events of Lord of the Rings, she's grown up, for
hmm.
lack of a better word. Um, you know,
Which
she's
it's weird
and
for elves.
she's had to suffer a great deal. Like, just like she's one of the oldest living beings in Middle Earth. She was there since the first age. Like, she had to suffer a lot
Hmm,
to get to where she was. Um, in the Fellowship of the Ring, and of course the movie can't show that, because if it did, that would just be another 20 hours of content just
hmm,
following Galadriel's backstory. But as a character, she's given a lot of respect, because she's been through like all the significant historical events that she played her part in them. But like, we often forget, like, she went through a lot. Like, she would
hmm.
when they were traveling out of well, the equivalent of heaven. I forget the exact name now. Again, it's been too long since I've read the
It's
books.
like the Grey Havens or something.
No, this is beyond that. But
Ah,
I,
yeah.
I'm gonna remember the name, like, in like once we finish recording, and then I'll
Yeah.
feel awful that I looks like a dumb person here. But when she was traveling back to Middle Earth, they had to pass through the equivalent of the equivalent of the Arctic, except 10 times more deadly.
Hmm,
Tolkien gave it a name, but I can't pronounce that word, so I'm not even gonna try.
hmm,
Um, and so she would have had to watch a lot of her people die.
hmm. I think the interesting thing with Galadriel is, it's weird to see character development in elves because they live for so long and time works
Mm,
differently for them. But literally because she is
yeah.
so old that, yeah, it makes sense for her to have developed as a character, like
Mm,
over those like thousands of years.
yeah. I
Anyway,
mean, the elves always go on and on about how proud they are of being like unchangeable, but Galadriel is living proof that
mm,
that is not true.
it's not the case. Or not the case of all the. Oh, it's
Well,
a
not
rare case, but
it's
it
well, I guess
still
what I could
happens.
say is that it's not a certainty. Like, time does get to you,
Yeah, and
and it does.
experiences.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
experiences will change you whether you like it or not.
Mm. Anyway, the last sort of point in the movie that we'll wrap on is the battle between the Uruk-hai and the Fellowship. I think, yeah, the way that it's built up to that scene where Boromir tries taking the ring from Frodo, you see the hold the ring has on him, how it builds up to that point, but then you see how he like then gets like released from that like trance like state. And yeah, Boromir is just he's such a misunderstood character. Um,
I mean, when I first watched
yeah.
the film, I was just like, Boromir's this. I was like, hey, this is a terrible person.
Mm,
He's completely corrupted. He's from the beginning. He's just this selfish, arrogant guy who's just trying to take the ring and just do whatever he wants. And then the more like when I read through the books and I've watched movies again and I've really thought about it, I was like, you know what? Would any of us really have done anything that different?
mm,
Because Boromir, don't forget, this guy is like he's the chosen representative of the races of men in the Fellowship. So
mm.
this guy is like, I mean, you've got Aragorn, but he's kind of seen as a bit of an outsider.
Yeah.
So Boromir, and you can even argue that Aragorn has like his link to the Dunedain, so he's got
Yeah.
longevity. So, but Boromir is him. He is him.
Mm,
Boromir is Boromir is just this like this champion that's like talked up. He's done all these incredible things previously, um, and yet this guy who is essentially like the paragon of like capability ends up succumbing to the ring.
mm.
And he gets completely consumed by it. And so if the paragon of of strength and power could fall, how much easier would that be for us?
Mm.
And also, we should also keep in mind, if you actually think about with that in mind, like the Nazgul, they were kings of men. They were literal kings. Boromir was never a king. They were
Mm.
also, great warriors, strong, powerful, virtuous, so on and so forth. They all fell to the ring, and they remained held by it. But Boromir, despite
Yeah.
falling to it, he actually breaks free.
Yeah. And then he goes out like a champ.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, he's
Remember how I mentioned that when Gandalf dies, even though you know what's going to happen, you feel it.
yeah. And like that's the
Even
same with
when
Boromir's death.
even when you know what's about to happen, you can't help but feel just so encouraged, and you think everything's going to be okay because Boromir is here and he's just being amazing.
Mm. Yeah. It's the way he just like comes in out of nowhere to protect Merry and Pippin, but then ultimately to fail, unfortunately, and die. I guess like a noble death. But yeah, I think one thing I do find interesting in that sort of scene where, he's now passed away and there's Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas there, is the reaction of Legolas, who is just like in that sort of. Oh no, wait, sorry, I'm thinking to after Gandalf dies. Legolas' reaction of just being like shocked
Mm.
because as an elf, you're not really used to death and
Yeah,
seeing people
especially because
die.
he's a younger elf as well.
Yeah,
He's not like
and he's
Galadriel who's
been
had to
sort
watch
of
people die. He'd never have seen that.
like he's been confined to the woodland realm as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that. Anyway, I was getting off topic. I thought that was now, but that was actually Gausa.
Yeah. Maybe.
But yeah, just the way Boromir goes out, like even acknowledging Aragorn as a brother,
Yeah.
a captain, and the true king, and it's like,
Mm.
yeah, I think,
Especially because he was so resistant to that at the beginning.
yeah, but it's something the books flesh out a lot more is Boromir and Aragorn's relationship. Like you see that throughout the sort of the
Mm.
journey to fellowship, not just at the end, which
Yeah.
unfortunately we didn't get in the movies, which it's
Yeah.
understandable. Um, but yeah, and then I
But I
mean,
mean,
yeah,
one thing about Boromir that I think is, I just want to mention this because I think it's really important. Yes, Boromir died an honorable death, but I feel like that's ultimately not what makes his like his death and his actions so powerful. It's not the fact that he just died honorably. It's that his final actions were what have sacrificed. He chose to live honorably.
mm,
Like it's the fact that it's not just that he died in battle. Like that's like yeah, that's great.
mm,
Like it's a great scene, powerful. But it's the fact that he was willing to that he fell so low, but he was willing to claw his way back up,
yeah,
and that he chose to spend those last moments in defense of something else
mm,
and fighting for someone else. Like that's what makes it,
mm,
in my opinion, like just so powerful. It's not the fact that he died. This like, it's not the fact that he like got shot by 3 arrows and he's still, you know, breathing. It's like no, that's amazing.
yeah,
Yes, but the fact that he's putting himself on the line for someone else after having just experienced what would have been the most soul crushing moment of his life,
yeah. Like, I mean,
and
yeah,
yet to
from
just
oh yeah, yep.
yeah, and just to be able to just still keep going despite all that,
Yeah,
and just
from
to essentially redeem himself, for lack of a better
yeah,
word.
a terrible. Obviously, he would have had so much guilt and shame after trying to take the ring from Frodo to not just grow in that, but to pick himself back up, and then also being pierced with one, then two arrows. Instead of just like giving up, he still kept fighting, trying to say,
Like
which
getting shot
ultimately,
by an, I mean, it's funny. Like we feel like, I mean, I've read like a lot of like epic fantasy books. I've watched a lot of movies. Like, and we kind of get desensitized to just the impact of violence and pain. Like, I mean, have you played the Uncharted video games before?
no.
Um, okay, I'm just bringing this up as an example. It's basically action movies the game. That's
Mm,
all it is. It's amazing, but the main character just gets this absolute bucket load of physical trauma just dumped on him, and he just like rolls through it. And
mm,
we kind of do that in all of this media that we consume, and we get used to that. You know, when the hero gets like punched in the face, we'll be like, oh yeah, he's gonna get up. Or even like in like professional, if you watch something like the UFC, you watch like you know combatants, take these punches, these kicks, just like to their
Mm.
face, to like their core, everywhere. They just keep going, and we sort of we accept that as normal, but we forget that like even a single hit can be debilitating.
And
Like
those arrows,
getting hit by just one arrow alone
no.
would have been enough to make most people give up. Like I would have just given up. If I got hit by one arrow, I would just be like, "Yep, that's it. I'm done. I'm dying. There's too much pain. I'm just gonna lie here and bleed out. I've
No,
had enough."
those arrows were heavy though. Like you hear the
Mm,
thud. Like
yes.
that was a massive bow. There was some massive arrows. Like the
Yeah.
impact was crazy. Anyway, as much as I want to keep talking, we last sort of I guess thing we'll touch on is then Frodo and Sam journeying off. The power again seen in Sam's loyalty to not leave Frodo behind, and we're left at the end of the movie with just this split fellowship. It
Mm,
feels like they only just formed, and then all of a sudden, Gandalf's
yeah.
supposedly dead, Boromir's dead, Merry and Pippin have been taken, Frodo and Sam split off, and then there's Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas. Which,
Mm.
yeah, it's a pretty like,
It's a somber ending.
yeah, it's weird. Like it's a just leaves you like what is going on, what's going to happen next, like where do you go from here?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Anyway, we have gone so much over time than I was expecting. I was thinking we were going to get all three movies done, but we are
The
already
funniest
like,
thing is, there's like so much that we haven't even covered.
oh,
Like we
literally,
never even we
literally.
haven't even discussed Aragorn.
Nah, there's
Like,
so many things. Like we didn't discuss the knife being thrown at him when it wasn't meant to be thrown
no.
directly at him, but then he deflects it anyway with the sword. It's a real knife, and he deflects, and then that scene makes the cut.
Yeah.
Just like there's so many things we could have discussed, but we are already like over an hour and 23 minutes in. We're gonna make this a three-part series, I guess. So we'll have to do episodes 2 and 3 of this another time.
Will we
Yeah,
be more prepared next time? Probably
yeah,
not. But
yeah, probably not. Like we've done this recording with zero preparation at all. Like
mm.
we've just rocked up and hit record.
Look,
So
to
this is
be
all
fair though,
improvisation.
if someone is actually watching this to the end, then it's
Oh,
pretty clear
well
that you
done.
either love Lord. It's pretty clear that you either love Lord of the Rings or you just feel really bad for us. Um,
Well done
whichever
if
one
you
of those
made it.
two it is, well done to you. And if you've watched this far, it clearly means that you know you like us doing this with no preparation. So we're just gonna probably keep doing
If you haven't watched Lord of the Rings and you made it this far, what are you doing? Anyway,
that.
um,
It's not too late though. You could always. It's never too late to start.
it's never too late. Anyway, thank you for, I guess, watching this very long special episode of the podcast. Sorry for it being so long. We'll get episodes 2 and 3 out of this series another time, whether that's next week, a month, 2 months, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.